Welcome viewers to another episode of Route 139. Did you ever think about why you learn differently, maybe from a brother or sister? Or you want to be a better speller, or you want to do something that you see your other friends or peers do, and you just keep on struggling a little bit? But we're going to have some answers for you today, and that is that there are different learning styles. And once you know what your learning style is, probably that you can use that learning style to learn whatever subject that you need to learn and do a great job at it. So today we have with us a wonderful psychiatrist, Dr. Manal Durgan, who works with children and youth, adolescents, and with that struggle in many different ways, whether emotionally or behaviorally. But she's going to give us some tips about these learning styles, and perhaps in the process you can discover what your learning style is. Are you an audio learner, or are you a visual learner? Do you like to be hands-on, and so forth? This can also help you as you move towards your college career, and see what it is that you might want to do. And then in the process, you might think, oh, wait a minute, that there are some very major challenges here. So Dr. Durgan is also going to tell us what some of those challenges are, and how learning what your learning style is can actually help you to develop a way to deal with some of those challenges as well too. So welcome again, Dr. Durgan. Tell us a little bit more about the learning styles that we all have different learning styles. Even twins have different learning styles. They may share some similarities, but certainly there's going to be some differences in how to maximize those differences.
It would be my pleasure, Marilyn. Thank you for inviting me. Well, we all have different learning styles based on our a whole host of factors: our personality strengths, our brain or cognitive strengths, our social emotional strengths. But biologically speaking, the brain usually learns information in every person differently. And some people are better what we call visual learners. They learn information better if they see it, and if the new information is repeated through seeing it, either on the blackboard or in books or through flashcards, whereas other people are born to be stronger auditory learners. Auditory learners are those where they learn better if they hear it. They have to hear it in order for it to be reinforced as something that they can learn more easily than information that may be presented to them through a visual forum or through visual means. And then there are people who are, as Dr. Acladio said, more hands-on learners, what we call people who are tactile learners, who their strengths are to learn things by doing it and by feeling it and by somehow experiencing it through touch. And what's interesting is that most people, once they identify what's their best type of learning style, can use that as in a strengths-based learning approach. And both those children and youth who don't have any academic or learning issues can benefit from knowing what their optimal way of learning is, as well as those who may have challenges in learning can benefit from knowing what their optimal way of learning is.
So basically, by exposing children when they're young to different ways of learning, as they get a little bit older, then they will start to show that they are gravitating towards maybe one or the other, even if they don't realize that. And this should not be something alarming. So you, youth, as you're watching, think about where are your interests and what pulls you more. What would you like to do all day if you could, which you can't, but if you could do it all day, what would you like to do? Would you like to be building blocks? Would you like to get those model cars? Well, I know that, I don't know about if this generation is doing it, but I know in my generation, a lot of boys and girls like to build model cars, model planes, and so forth. Or do you like to paint? Do you like to draw? Do you have those forms? and so on. So this can help you to also compensate when you have some of those challenges. So learning what you like to do and then applying it to all of those disciplines. So we're going to try to take some concrete examples. Say, for example, for the auditory learners, well, there are a lot of books now that are on tape. Even like medical schools, there are lectures. You can watch them visually, or you can hear them in your car. Plug them in, and as you drive. And so you're hearing it, or you're seeing it and hearing it, and so on. So there are so many different ways that you can really take those and apply them in so many different disciplines. But we also have some challenges as well too. And sometimes, some youth think, hey, I'm just not smart. And you ask them, well, how do you know that? Well, my grades are not that good. I study, but my grades are not that good. So can you tell us a little bit about what processing is? Auditory processing. Can you tell us a little bit about, maybe just a little bit, I know we can't do a whole program on it, but maybe what dyslexia is, or maybe what ADHD is. There are so many children today, that just so many people, even servants, think, oh, that child has too much energy. That child is hyper. That child is ADHD. It's a misdiagnosis. So, and even if those are the real diagnosis, how can they be channeled into something positive?
Well, that's a big question, but I'll try my best to answer it. The first thing you asked about was auditory processing problems. Some children are born with certain parts of their brain, and they don't appear on brain scans to be abnormal, but they're what they call subtle neurologic problems in their brains that don't show up on brain scans that affect their ability to break down information that they hear. And that can lead to what we call auditory processing problems. And auditory processing problems is a very broad group of different disorders that can involve spoken language as well as language that you hear, but mostly it involves understanding language, and the parts of the brain that are responsible for understanding language just don't work the way they're supposed to. And then there are learning disabilities, one of which is dyslexia. Learning disabilities have nothing to do with how smart you are, how bright, or what your IQ is. They have to do with whether your ability to process, your brain's ability to process or break down certain types of information matches or is significantly below what is expected with your IQ. And there are many, many modalities now of help. Computer programs, extra academic visual, auditory supports in the classroom, tactile supports that help children and youth with learning disabilities. So if you have learning disabilities, if you don't know if you have a learning disability, but you know you have a learning problem, or your child has a learning problem, it's best to start to first discuss and formulate a plan with your school's educators, with their teacher and their educational team, sometimes the school counselor, because as Dr. Claudio stated, school problems in learning can come out in a whole variety of ways. It can come out through behavioral problems at school, whereas the children, you might not necessarily just see, or you might not see any grade problems, but you might see more behavioral problems, or behavioral problems in addition to problems with the child's grades. And they might come out with emotional problems where the child is anxious and doesn't want to go to school, or avoids school, or becomes phobic about school. And then there are other types of disorders there are disorders called disruptive behavior disorders, and one of which is very well-known these days, called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It occurs in about 3 to 5% of youth. And this is generally Western youth, but it is found to occur to a slightly lesser degree, but still a substantial degree in other cultures as well. And in 25% of children who meet diagnosis for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they also have a family history, that is a parent or a relative, a grandparent, who has had this problem. And what it's defined as is that it's significant problems in social and school functioning that affect social and school functioning, that involve many symptoms involved with being able to focus and complete their schoolwork. That is, in their ability to pay attention and not be distracted by external events. And these are the children that sometimes you find they shift from one incomplete activity to another when their schoolmates their age are not do not have problems in this area. So it also usually has to start occurring before a child is too old. It usually starts to show up in their early elementary school or earlier ages of life. The child often loses school supplies, forgets to turn in their homework. They don't pay attention to details. They make careless mistakes. They have trouble finishing their classwork and homework, and it's not their fault. It's due to this brain disorder. It's really a biological brain disorder. It's studies of children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder have shown that they have lower levels of certain chemicals in certain areas of the brain, norepinephrine and dopamine. And studies have also shown that medications alone are not always as effective as adding behavioral treatment, parental training, teaching kids through cognitive techniques to problem solve and change the way they think about themselves, because often their self-esteem is affected because they feel that they can't learn as well as others, and they don't, and their social relationships might be affected as well, in that they tend to be, because they tend to be more impulsive and have a difficult time focusing and sitting still in their seats in school. That often translates into difficulties when they're with their friends, because those types of behaviors can be stressful on their friendships and other social relationships, like their relationships with their parents, or with other family members and other adults, like teachers. So it's very important to have, if a child with learning disorders, a learning problem, it is out there, if you're that child, or if you feel you have a learning problem, or if you're that parent, it's important that you ask yourself, has my school trying to help me identify what is behind this problem? Do they have a plan? Like, do I have an individual educational plan, which is like a plan that the parents and teachers engage with? It's like a contract where they get together and they meet about you as a child and try to figure out what supports they can put in place in the school and what might be causing you to have the learning problems. Or do you need to see a mental health professional, like a child psychiatrist or a psychologist, that can do further evaluation and professional testing if your IEP plan or the plan in your school and that your parents have for you is not working and you're still having problems. And it's also important to make sure that your pediatrician or family doctor has checked for conditions that can lead, medical conditions other than ADHD that can lead, or learning disorders or learning disabilities that can lead to learning difficulties. For example, young children in older buildings can have lead intoxication. Also, children with seizures can have problems focusing and staying still in their seat. And there are different types of seizures where they can have staring spells and not only have stiffening and shaking of their bodies. You can also have children who have the communication disorders we talked about before, like auditory processing or phonological articulation, expressive language disorders. And so you want to make sure that the child is also evaluated with their vision and their hearing, to make sure that all of these other treatable problems are looked into, and then hopefully you can find a solution for what's making you or your child be challenged in learning.
So basically, what you want to do is identify if you are having struggles. For our young viewers, talk to your teachers, talk to your parents about possibly having an evaluation done at school. and there's no cost for that if you go to a public school. You may have to go to private areas and tap into all the resources that Dr. Durgan mentioned as well too, because these resources are there for you. So this way, by identifying if there's any issue, then you can start to address it, and then this way you can continue on your path of success. You have intelligence, you have abilities, you have skills, everything can work for you. But sometimes we kind of get stuck a little bit, but we can also learn to compensate for many areas in which that we have challenges. So I encourage you all to stay positive, talk to your teachers, talk to your parents, and let us know if there's anything, if there's any more information maybe that they would want from you, Dr. Durgan, to find out more about some of the resources that are out there in the community and some of the diagnoses that may be there or may not be there, so that this way that you can continue to succeed. Well, I hope that this important program was a benefit to you, and we look forward to having you again joining us on Route 139.